would you just touch on cholesterol for people listening? Can you explain the difference between, you know, the lipoprotein particles and what cholesterol and cholesterol, you know, and that they're not the same, and what, you know, what we're actually seeing on a blood test when we get our cholesterol tested?
Yeah, so cholesterol, it's a fatty, waxy substance, and it's crucial for life. So no cholesterol, no life. It's in all of our cells and all the membranes. It gives fluidity to the membranes. It's used to make hormones and pre-hormones. It's literally just, it's probably the most important molecule for mammalian life there is. So just get that one first, maybe. And the lipoprotein, so the cholesterol that has to be transported around your blood for all the crucial roles I mentioned and more, it's fat-based, it's hydrophobic, so it can't flow and dissolve in your watery aqueous blood. So these fats have to be packaged into, think of them as little submarines, right? Where the fatty elements like cholesterol are inside a little submarine. That's a lipoprotein. And the outside shell of the submarine is compatible and can dissolve in the watery blood. So they're little containers, and you have countless trillions of them all the time in your bloodstream because cholesterol is so important. And they travel around and they dock to fat cells, and they give up triglyceride fats for energy. They also store those. They go to organs and they provide cholesterol. They dock and they provide cholesterol out of these submarines, if you will. And this is going on all the time because cholesterol is so important. So the one people will have heard of is the LDL, the bad cholesterol. And that's the low density lipoprotein. And it's simply the one that is most associated with cholesterol. And if you have high LDL levels, low density lipoprotein, it's seen as a risk factor. But the reality is the high LDL levels are not really causing the problem. It's what made them go high, or it's what damaged your lipoproteins, or it's what changed the ratio of your HDL, your good cholesterol, to your LDL. That's mostly insulin resistance that causes your cholesterol system to become dysfunctional. So the big missing in all of this is they saw that the LDL kind of correlated or linked to more heart disease, very noisy and not very reproducibly, but they knew it linked to the heart disease. But what none of them realized was insulin resistance was causing the cholesterol system to become disturbed. And then it was linking to heart disease because it was the insulin resistance that was causing the actual dysfunction. So if people can get that, your cholesterol system is beautiful, exotic. You make most of your own cholesterol, around 80%. If you eat less cholesterol, your body will automatically make more. And if you eat less, if you eat less cholesterol, your body will make more from your liver. And if you eat more cholesterol, your body will be able to make a little less. But your body is making all this. It's part of the system. But the system can get damaged. We can damage your lipoproteins, those submarines. You can cause them to become a problem. But you do that by the real root causes of heart disease, like insulin resistance or smoking or hypertension or, you know, autoimmune diseases, you know, cause inflammation, inflammatory pressures. So there's a whole range of things. But the cholesterol system is really just the canary in the coal mine. It changes when you've got a real problem. And the guys made a big mistake and they thought the changes were the problem. Yeah.
And so what you're really saying is that these, you know, damaging mechanisms, they damage the actual lipoprotein particles themselves, but they also damage the blood vessel walls, don't they?
Yeah, it's damage across many, many levels. So when you are insulin resistant, which is the big one, so we'll stick to the big cause and not get too complicated. What will happen is you will be causing inflammatory pressure on the inside of your artery wall. You'll be damaging the layers that protect that. You'll be causing porosity. You'll be causing growth of the inner wall of the artery. And when it grows, it becomes hypoxic, or it's hard to get oxygen in to feed it. And then more blood vessels are forced to come in and they bring in more problems. So So yes, the problem is hurting your artery wall, but it's also hurting your lipoprotein particles. So those LDLs that evolution gave you countless trillions of, they can become oxidized, right, or damaged, and then they do become part of the problem. So your cholesterol system is also getting damaged and in turn causing more damage. And the way you'll know is in your cholesterol test, where you got your LDL, you got your HDL, and your total cholesterol and your triglycerides. There's 4 readings you can get from the doc. Well, if your LDL is going up and your HDL is going down, that's a sign that you're damaging your lipoproteins. So the most important measure from the cholesterol test is not the LDL number, and it's not the total cholesterol number. It's the total to HDL ratio. So if you divide your total by your HDL, let's say your total is 8, your HDL is 2, then you get a ratio of 4. And 4 is good. Being below 5 or below 4.5 is a good sign. So that's the simple thing to get from your test. Now, some laboratories are now showing that total over HDL ratio, and some rare doctors are looking at that more than the LDL, but they're rare because this has not got out yet. And the other measure is the triglyceride to HDL ratio. And maybe I won't get into that, it's a little more complicated. But the big thing is that the LDL value in itself does not really mean much at all. So to give people an idea, we have people with profound heart disease, disaster arteries, with an LDL of 2.2 for decades. We also have people who in their 60s have a 0 calcium score and even clear angiograms in their 60s, and they've had an LDL of 12 to 15 for decades. So hopefully people can realize when you have a situation like that, it's not the LDL driving the problem. If certain people can have an LDL 4 times safe plus for decades and in their 60s have incredibly low heart disease, you know. So the LDL is, like I say, it's a canary. Looking at the numbers and the ratios can infer or help you judge if you have a real problem going on. But that's mostly it.
So my total cholesterol is about 17. So
Yeah.
we can talk about ApoE4 shortly, because I know that you've got an ApoE4 gene, and I'm a 4/4. So.
4/4. Wow.
Yeah.
My son, my 5th child I tested, he's 4/4. And it's less than 1% of people, really.
Yeah, but we can talk about that in a moment. Triglycerides. So I think that's a great thing for people to look at on their own blood tests, you know, and make sure triglycerides are low. What sort of levels do you like them? I kind of work at under 1. I don't know what you think about that.
Exactly. Under 1 is a great benchmark. I mean, if you want to be a little more slack, you could say 1.2. But yeah, under 1. I think I'm around 0.75 generally. Some people go for even lower. But under 1 is fair. And you're using, I think, millimoles. So the triglyceride to HDL ratio, let's say you're 1 on triglyceride and you're 1.8 on HDL, then you're going to be around 0.6 in the ratio. You divide the HDL in. Once you're in millimoles, now American, it's different. And, you know, to be around, you know, 0.6, 0.7 in that ratio is really good. And even to be below 1 for modern people is not too bad. So the ratio is even better because it takes into account the high HDL and the low triglyceride together. So the ratio is a much more powerful metric than just looking at the triglyceride and just the HDL, because a person with high HDL, which is healthy, and low triglyceride is going to get a really good ratio. So it's a great measure for sure. And
would you talk a little bit about what causes high triglycerides? Because again, it's not really the fat, is it? It's the carbohydrate.
Essentially, high triglycerides are driven primarily by excessive carbohydrates. So that's not like eating a lot of broccoli, which is a carbohydrate food, a plant food, or eating a lot of cauliflower. We know what we're talking about. We're talking about excessive sugars, refined carbs, refined grains. And essentially, when you're eating too many of those, they lead towards insulin resistance. They lead towards the type 2 diabetes problem. If you mix these bad foods with fatty natural foods, that's not good either. So one mistake they made in the past was that they didn't realize that the mixture of carbs and fat was important. They just thought you just look at the number, but it's not true. If you eat a lot of natural fatty foods with no carbohydrate or very little, that's perfectly fine for the vast majority of people. It's healthy. But if you eat half healthy fats and half bad refined carbohydrates, that's a really bad mixture. So that does not work out well, because the refined carbohydrates drive up your insulin. You then cannot burn the fats in a healthy way, and it pushes towards diabetes, just like eating way too much refined carbohydrate would. So it's just a point on the mixture is important too. But essentially, when you become insulin resistant, your liver begins to lose its control of insulin, and it begins to create more sugars, believe it or not. So a problem with a type 2 diabetic type person is not only are they eating too many sugars and carbs, which they're intolerant to, they're actually allergic to them at this stage, but their liver is not able to control, and it makes even more sugars, right? So you've got this problem of gluconeogenesis, it's called, of making more sugars. And they generally, when they pile up, the body attempts to turn them into fats to store them. So you get blood fat going up as well. So it's just this catastrophic mixture that a type 2 diabetic type person, which is the majority of American adults now, remember, and other countries catching up, they've got the terrible triad. They've got high blood sugars, high blood insulin, and high blood fats all together. But those would never occur in evolution. In evolution, you'll get a high blood sugar if you're fight or flight. You'll pump out sugar to give you energy. And also sometimes your body will pump out fats and release fats for energy, in a fight situation. But a steady background level of high sugars, high fats, and high insulin in your blood is horrific for your arteries. That's why type 2 diabetes is such a terrible, terrible disease, for that reason.
And it's a real driver of heart disease, isn't it?
Yeah.